All right. Welcome to your personalized deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be talking about what shapes ethical leadership,
Okay.
especially in higher education.
Interesting.
And our guide for this deep dive is a fascinating dissertation called Nurturing the Ethical Reasoning of Leaders
Okay.
by Jeanette Della Rosa Ducut.
All right.
And she didn't just talk about like theories or anything. She actually studied actual doctoral students in organizational leadership.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to be getting some real-world insights here.
Yeah, those are the best kind.
I think a lot of us, have sat through ethics training and kind of wondered, like, does this stuff actually stick?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Or ethical leaders just like born that way? Is it just something you have or you don't?
Yeah, it's a question that's been debated for, probably centuries, like nature versus nurture.
Right.
So Ducut's research, though, really dives right into the heart of it and starts with why ethics education is so important for leaders in particular.
And she doesn't pull any punches. The dissertation, opens the Enron scandal.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which is a pretty stark reminder of what can happen when ethical leadership fails.
It's a classic case, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, how even the most brilliant minds can make these, disastrous ethical choices.
Right.
And, the fallout from Enron,
Right.
huge, sent shockwaves through the business world.
Right.
And really underscored the need for a more proactive approach,
Yeah.
We can't just wait for these things to happen. We need to be,
We got to do something.
Yeah, we got to prepare.
To develop these leaders.
Right.
So, okay. So can you actually, teach someone to be ethical?
Right. That's the question.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
The dissertation explores this using something called Kohlberg's cognitive moral development model.
Okay.
Can you give us, the Cliff's Notes version of this?
Okay, so Kohlberg's model, think of it like a roadmap,
Okay.
Like a roadmap of moral development.
I like that, yeah.
It outlines how our reasoning about right and wrong, actually evolves over time.
Okay.
And so it starts with, basic obedience to rules, don't do this, don't do that.
Right.
And then it moves to, conforming to social norms.
Right.
What everybody else is doing, that kind of thing. And then, the final stage is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Okay.
Where individuals, they actually develop their own, universal ethical principles.
Okay.
And this can sometimes even clash, with societal expectations.
Wow. So it's like they've developed this kind of internal compass.
Exactly.
But it may not align with what society's telling them or what the rules are or whatever.
Right.
That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and so somebody, at that top level, they're not just following the rules because they're, afraid of getting in trouble.
Right.
Or it's what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
They're really making those decisions based on a deeper internal.
Yeah, internal compass.
Okay.
And to measure where people fall on this kind of moral development spectrum, Ducat used the defining issues test.
Okay.
Or it's called the DIT.
DIT, okay.
And so this isn't a test with, right or wrong answers.
Yeah.
It's really about understanding how people arrive at their ethical decisions.
So it's more about the process.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's like how they think through it.
Yeah.
Less about the actual answer.
So I'm wondering, is this DIT something that could be used, beyond academia?
It's a good question.
Could it help organizations to identify, potential leaders who already have a strong ethical foundation?
Yeah.
Is that possible?
It's a fascinating possibility, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, imagine using the DIT, right?
Right.
To assess candidates during the hiring process, maybe.
Right.
Or to even tailor, leadership development programs.
To address specific ethical strengths and weaknesses, the potential applications are, really vast.
Right. You could really get granular with it.
Yeah, for sure.
Figure out where people are at and then tailor the program to address that.
Exactly.
Okay. So Ducat studied doctoral students in organizational leadership.
Right. Well,
Were they all enrolled in the same ethics course?
So actually, they were split into two groups.
Okay.
One group was taking a core ethics course and the other wasn't.
Okay.
And so here's where things get really interesting. Taking the ethics course alone did not actually lead to a significant increase in ethical reasoning scores.
Oh, wow. So all those lectures and case studies and all that stuff
Yeah.
didn't like magically transform them into ethical superheroes.
Right.
Interesting.
Not quite. Yeah. And this finding, I mean, it really challenges that assumption, right?
Right?
That just exposing people to these ethical concepts
Right.
is enough. It suggests that the how of ethics education is just as crucial as the what, you know?
So it's not enough to just tell people what's right and wrong.
Right.
You've got to give them the tools. You've got to give them the skills
Yeah, exactly.
to actually like navigate those gray areas
Right.
and make those ethical choices when they're, under pressure.
Right. Yeah. It's, real life is messy.
Yeah.
It's not a textbook.
So this is where Ducat's research goes beyond Kohlberg, I guess.
Yeah.
She explores this framework called RESTS 4 component model.
Right.
And this model highlights like the different factors
Okay.
that influence whether we actually like act on our ethical reasoning.
Right. Because you can know it, but...
Right. But that doesn't mean you do it.
Right.
Okay. So break it down for us. What are these 4 components?
Right. So first, you have to recognize that, like, an ethical issue even exists, right?
Okay.
And that's called moral sensitivity.
Moral sensitivity. Okay.
So can you even see it? And then the next part is moral reasoning. So you figure out what the right course of action would be.
So that's where Kohlberg comes in, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So you're figuring out like what's the best, most ethical,
Yeah,
exact thing.
Yeah.
But knowing what's right doesn't always mean you're going to do it.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where the moral motivation comes in.
Okay.
So are you actually, like, committed to acting ethically, even when it's tough?
Oh, that's the hard part.
Yeah, right.
Right. Because it's easy to say, oh, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
an ethical person. But when you're actually faced with that choice,
Yeah,
it can be a lot harder.
exactly. And then finally, there's the moral behavior.
Okay.
So this is like the actual execution, right? Following through.
Yeah. So you've recognized it. You've thought about it.
Yeah.
You've decided to do it. But now you've got to actually do it.
You got to do it right.
Yeah.
You got to follow through.
Wow. Okay. So someone could like ace an ethics exam. right?
Yeah.
They could know all this stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah.
if they lack the sensitivity to actually spot those ethical dilemmas
Yeah.
out in the real world, or the motivation to actually
Yeah.
like follow through, they could still make some pretty bad choices.
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah.
So it's really about developing all 4 of those.
Yeah.
Not just the reasoning
Yeah.
part, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Okay, so Doka didn't stop at exploring how people learn ethics.
Right.
She also looked at like different teaching methods.
Okay.
And this is where I think it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
She studied 3 approaches:
Right.
moral development,
Okay.
values clarification,
Okay.
and values transmission.
Yeah.
Did any of these kind of stand out in terms of like effectiveness?
Yeah. So the results were kind of surprising.
Okay, tell me.
So courses that focused on this values clarification,
Okay.
they actually saw an increase in ethical reasoning scores.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And these courses, they encourage students to really reflect on their own values
Okay.
and think critically about, what they actually believe.
So it's less about like imposing a set of rules, and it's more about guiding them to develop their own kind of internal framework.
Exactly, their own internal compass.
Okay.
And this approach, it seems like it really has a lasting impact
Yeah.
on how people approach those, ethical dilemmas.
Okay. So I know you're particularly interested in like the connection between leadership styles
Yes.
and ethical behavior.
Yes.
What did Duca uncover in that area?
Well, she looked at transformational leadership.
Okay.
This style kind of inspires followers to reach their full potential
Okay.
and often promotes like higher level needs and values.
Okay.
And it's often contrasted with transactional leadership,
Okay.
which is more focused on like rewards and punishments.
So transformational leaders are like the big picture
Yeah.
visionary.
Right.
And the transactional leaders are more focused on the day-to-day.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the nuts and bolts.
But I'm guessing it's not always so black and white.
No, you're right. It's rarely that simple. And the dissertation introduces a really fascinating concept called pseudo-transformational leadership.
Pseudo. Okay.
So imagine a leader who appears, very charismatic, ethical,
Right.
but they're actually manipulating others to serve their own agenda.
Oh, wow. That's a
Yeah.
scary thought.
Yeah.
Are there any red flags? Like how can you
yeah.
tell
Yeah.
if a leader is genuinely transformational or just a master manipulator?
That is the question.
Yeah.
That's a great question, and that is actually something that we're going to explore in more depth later.
Oh, good.
But it does highlight how important it is to look beyond, superficial charm
Right.
and rhetoric and really critically evaluate
Yeah.
a leader's actions and their motivations.
'Cause it's not just about what they say.
Right.
It's about what they actually do.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So their actions will ultimately reveal their true ethical compass.
Exactly, yeah. Actions speak louder than words.
And that leads us to another crucial question.
Okay.
Can a good leader, even a genuinely transformational leader, can they go bad over time?
That is a great question.
That's a topic for our next installment.
Yes.
We'll continue to unravel the mysteries of ethical leadership and all
I
that.
can't wait.
So stay tuned.
I'm excited.
Welcome back to our deep dive into ethical leadership.
Yes.
We're still working our way through Jeanette De La Rosa Ducout's research,
Okay.
trying to figure out what makes a truly ethical leader.
Right.
And one thing that's clear from her work is that ethical development doesn't just stop after a single ethics course.
Yeah.
It's a journey, not a destination.
It's a lifelong process, really.
So it's like building a muscle.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to keep exercising those ethical reasoning skills.
You got to stay in shape,
to stay in shape.
Yeah.
What did Duquette find when she looked at like the long-term effects of ethics education?
So she tracked the students for a while, measuring their ethical reasoning scores at different points.
Okay.
And remember, how we talked about that values clarification approach?
Yeah, the one that led to that increase.
Exactly, yeah. So that upward trend actually continued even a year after the course.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't just like a temporary boost.
Right.
It sounds like it really instilled some kind of lasting change in how those students thought about these issues.
Yeah, they internalized it, maybe.
What about the students that were exposed to that moral development approach?
Right.
I mean, they initially saw a dip in their scores, right?
Yes, but here's the interesting thing.
Okay.
Their scores actually rebounded after about 6 months.
Oh, okay. So there's hope? Even if exposure to these different levels of moral reasoning causes like a temporary dip, it sounds like there's still potential for growth over time.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not, it's not set in stone.
But it does sound like values clarification is maybe the more effective long-term strategy. What are the practical implications of that finding, though?
Well, it really challenges us to rethink how we actually design ethics curricula.
Okay.
I mean, not just in universities, but like all kinds of leadership development programs, right?
Right.
If we want to create leaders who can actually handle the really complex ethical challenges
of the real world.
Exactly, yeah, that we see today.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to focus less on these abstract theories and more on, self-reflection and critical thinking about one's own values.
So less preaching and more coaching.
Yeah, exactly.
Like helping people to develop that internal ethical compass.
Yeah. Exactly, that internal compass, right?
Instead of just handing them a rule book.
Because the rule book only gets you so far.
Right. Yeah, because the real world doesn't rarely presents like ethical dilemmas.
Right.
As like clear-cut choices, right?
Exactly. It's rarely black and white.
There's all these shades of gray and competing priorities
and then
pressure.
And the pressure to compromise your values, I think.
Right. And that's where those other components of Rest's model come in, right?
Yes.
The sensitivity to recognize it, the motivation to act, and then actually being able to follow through.
You got to be able to do it,
It's like you have all the right ingredients.
Right.
But if you don't know how to bake the cake,
exactly,
you're going to end up with a mess.
It's going to be a disaster. Yeah.
Okay. So Duquette's research also highlights the importance of individual factors. I guess that might influence ethical development.
Right.
Like age or gender or cultural background, things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. All those things come into play.
Okay.
And so, for instance, she found that students who had never actually participated in religious activities, they actually had higher ethical reasoning scores than those who attended, like, regularly.
Now, that's an unexpected twist.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's important to note, right, that this is just one study.
Right.
And there are many different interpretations, of course.
Of course.
But one possibility is that, religious activities, while they emphasize ethical behavior, they often focus on adhering to like external rules and doctrines.
So it's about following the rules because Because a higher authority says so?
Right.
Not necessarily because you've actually, like, internalized those values as your own?
Right. And perhaps that reliance, right, on this external authority might, in some cases, actually hinder the development of those higher-level, principle-based ethical reasoning skills.
So it makes you wonder if that emphasis on rule following could actually make it harder for some people to really, like, think critically about those dilemmas and make those decisions when the rules don't give them a clear answer.
Exactly. Yeah. When they have to actually think for themselves.
Yeah, when they're on their own.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So it highlights the complex interplay, I guess, of all these individual and cultural and societal factors that really contribute to a leader's ethical development.
It's not a simple equation, that's for sure.
It's like trying to solve a multi-dimensional puzzle.
Right.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Exactly, yeah. and of course, any good research acknowledges its limitations.
Right.
And so one limitation of this particular study, was the sample size.
Okay.
Duckett, she focused on doctoral students at one particular private university.
So we can't just assume that these findings would apply universally to all leaders in all contexts.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see, like, future research replicate this study with a more diverse sample.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, business executives and politicians and community leaders, all sorts of folks.
Absolutely. That would be fascinating, actually.
That would give us a much, much richer understanding, I think, of these factors that shape ethical leadership across different sectors and cultures and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
But even with those limitations,
yeah,
this dissertation offers some really valuable insights, I think.
It does, yeah.
Especially for aspiring leaders. It really emphasizes that ethics is not just some passive trait.
No.
It's an active skill.
Yeah, exactly.
That needs to be practiced and refined throughout a leader's entire career.
You got to keep working on it.
It's not enough to just, have good intentions.
Right.
Or even a strong understanding of these principles.
Right. You got to be able to apply it.
You have to be able to actually apply them in those real-world situations, often under pressure.
Right. When the heat is on.
Yeah, when it's tough.
Yeah.
And that requires, a constant process of learning and reflection and self-awareness, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Leaders need to be willing to really examine their own biases, challenge their assumptions, seek feedback from others.
Yeah, it's not something you can do on your own.
It's like being an athlete.
Yeah.
You wouldn't just show up for the big game without training and practicing and honing your skills.
Exactly. You got to put in the work.
Ethical leaderships, it's the same way.
Yeah.
It requires that ongoing effort and commitment.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
And it's not something you can do in isolation.
No, absolutely not.
The dissertation also, emphasizes the influence of the environment in which leaders operate.
Right.
So were you talking about, like, the organizational culture?
Exactly, yeah. The organizational culture, the climate, all of that.
So even the most ethically, astute leader will struggle to really make a difference if they're operating in a culture that doesn't support ethical behavior.
You need that support system.
It's like trying to, swim upstream against a strong current.
Exactly. Yeah. You need a culture that reinforces those ethical values and provides that safety net for the people who want to do the right thing.
Because speaking up about, unethical behavior, that can be incredibly risky, especially if there's a fear of retaliation.
Absolutely. Yeah, you need to feel safe to do that.
So creating a culture where people feel safe to actually raise those concerns, that's essential for fostering ethical leadership at all levels.
Exactly. Yeah. It has to be systemic.
This makes me think about, all those corporate ethics codes that you see, like, plastered on websites and framed on office walls. Are those actually effective?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And, research suggests that simply having a code of ethics is not enough.
Yep.
It really needs to be actively, lived and breathed by the organization's leadership,
right.
From the top all the way down.
So actions speak louder than words.
Actions speak louder than words, yeah.
Especially when it comes to ethics.
Exactly, yeah. Leaders, they need to walk the walk.
Yeah.
They need to demonstrate their commitment through their actions, through their decisions.
This gives me a whole new perspective, I think, on what it really means to lead with integrity.
Absolutely. And that's the power of this research, I think, right?
Yeah.
It pushes us to think critically about the complexities of ethical leadership.
Right.
And the fact that we need to, always be learning, reflecting, and creating these ethical cultures.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
But there's still more to explore.
There is, yeah.
In our final part, we're going to delve deeper into what it means to actually nurture ethical leadership in today's world. And explore some practical tools and strategies for putting these insights into action.
I'm excited.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of ethical leadership, guided by Jeanette De La Rosa Ducat's research.
Right.
And we've really unpacked a lot here,
We have.
From those moral development stages to the surprising power of values clarification.
Right.
And even the potential dark side of transformational leadership.
Right. Yeah. It's complicated.
But how do we actually apply all these insights, right?
That's the big question.
What does this mean for leaders out there in the real world?
Right.
Trying to make those ethical choices in the thick of it all.
Right. When they're in the trenches.
Yeah.
Well, and thankfully, Ducat's work, it doesn't leave us hanging.
Okay.
She offers kind of a roadmap for nurturing ethical leadership. And it's not about a one-time ethics seminar or just having some fancy code of conduct.
So it's more about building those ethical muscles over time.
Exactly. Yeah. Like we talked about earlier. It's about creating a culture of continuous learning and reflection. Where ethics isn't just some box to check, but a real integral part of how the whole organization operates.
And I bet those 4 components from Rest's model, they come into play here too, right?
Absolutely.
The sensitivity, the reasoning, the motivation, and the behavior that we were talking about.
Yeah. Leaders need to develop all of those aspects,
Right.
You can't just have the knowledge.
Yeah.
You got to be able to see the ethical dilemmas,
Right.
Feel motivated to actually do something about it,
Right.
And then have the skills to actually follow through.
So it's almost like those leadership simulations they use.
All right, exactly.
In business schools and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Where, you can study all the theory.
Right.
But you really need that practice to hone your skills.
You got to get your hands dirty, right?
Yeah.
You got to actually be in those situations.
And I imagine that's where organizational culture comes in too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
You can't just rely on individuals to be ethical superheroes.
Right.
You need a whole system.
Yeah, a whole system
that supports that ethical behavior.
It's got to be, top to bottom. It's got to be part of the fabric of the organization.
So leaders have a big role to play, I guess.
Huge role.
In creating that system.
Absolutely, yeah. They got to set the tone.
So they need to establish clear ethical guidelines.
Right, yeah, set the standards.
But more importantly, they need to actually, live those values every day.
They got to walk the walk.
So it's not just talking the talk, it's about walking the walk.
Yeah, because if a leader, says one thing but does another,
right,
that hypocrisy, it undermines everything. Any attempts to build that ethical culture. Yeah. People see through that right away.
Yeah, they're not going to buy it.
No.
And what about that speak up culture we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
How do you create an environment where people actually feel safe?
Yeah.
To raise those ethical concerns, even if it involves challenging those in authority.
That's huge. Leaders, they have to be, approachable, open to feedback.
Okay.
And willing to admit when they make a mistake.
Okay.
And there needs to be a very clear process for reporting concerns without that fear of retaliation.
It makes me think about, all those whistleblowing cases that we see that make the headlines.
Yeah.
And so often it seems like the individuals who try to do the right thing
Right.
are the ones that end up getting punished.
Yeah, it's a problem for sure. Yeah. Organizations, they really need to protect those who speak up and create that culture where doing the right thing is rewarded, not penalized.
Okay, so in addition to all this kind of systemic stuff, Dukat also emphasized the importance of self-awareness for ethical leaders.
Yeah, self-awareness is huge.
What did she mean by that?
Well, it's about, recognizing your own biases or blind spots and even your potential for rationalizing unethical behavior.
Okay.
I mean, we all have these things, right? Yeah. It's human nature. And it's so easy to fall into these traps, especially when you're under pressure or you have a lot at stake.
So even the most well-intentioned leader can stumble.
Yeah.
If they're not, constantly checking themselves and seeking feedback from others.
Exactly. Yeah. You need that outside perspective.
Right.
It's an ongoing process,
Right.
of reflection, seeking diverse perspectives, and being open to learning from your mistakes.
And that ties back to that idea of ethics as a skill.
Yeah.
Something that you need to practice and hone over time.
You got to keep sharpening the saw.
And just like any skill, there are tools and resources that can help. Right?
Yeah. There are frameworks for ethical decision making.
Right.
Workshops on recognizing and mitigating bias.
Okay.
There are even apps, that can prompt you to reflect on your values throughout the day.
It sounds like there's a whole ecosystem developing around ethical leadership development.
There is. Yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty cool.
And that's a positive sign, I think.
Yeah.
It shows that organizations are starting to get it.
Right.
That it's not enough to just talk about ethics. You got to actually invest in the development of these ethical leaders.
So if someone's listening to this and they want to become a more ethical leader, where should they start?
Well, I would say the first step is really that self-awareness piece we were just talking about.
Right.
Take some time to reflect on your own values.
Okay.
Identify your potential blind spots.
Right.
And think about how those might influence your decisions.
And don't be afraid to ask for feedback from others too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes we need that outside perspective.
Yeah, we can't see everything.
To help us see what we might be missing.
Right. We all have blind spots.
And remember, ethical leadership, it's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a marathon.
There's going to be bumps along the way. Mistakes are going to be made.
Right. We're all human.
But the important thing is to learn from those experiences.
Yeah.
And keep striving, keep pushing yourself.
They're getting better.
To become a better, more ethical version of yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, this has been such a thought-provoking deep dive.
Yeah, it has.
We've explored, the intricacies of ethical reasoning and the different factors that shape ethical leadership, and even some practical strategies for developing those skills.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And while we've covered a lot, it's really just the tip of the iceberg, I think.
It really is.
I encourage you to explore the resources that we've provided in the show notes.
Yes.
And most importantly, keep asking those tough questions about ethics and leadership.
Keep learning.
Because the world needs more ethical leaders now more than ever, right?
Absolutely. Now more than ever.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.